The howling wind carried the promise of death, as Sarah Miller clutched her wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, the feeble protection doing little against the unexpected blizzard that had descended upon the stagecoach. The November of 1875 in northern Arizona Territory had turned treacherous without warning, transforming what should have been a routine journey to Agua Caliente into a desperate fight for survival. "Ladies, hold tight," the driver shouted before a sickening crack split the air. The stagecoach lurched violently, sending Sarah tumbling against Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, a wealthy widow traveling to meet her son. A scream erupted from young Beatrice Collins, barely 19 and on her way to become a schoolteacher in the frontier town. The next moments passed in a blur of splintering wood and panicked shouts. When the world stopped spinning, Sarah found herself sprawled in snow that shouldn't have blanketed Arizona's typically arid landscape. The overturned stagecoach lay several feet away, one wheel still spinning uselessly in the air. The driver and guard were nowhere to be seen, likely thrown clear and lost in the swirling white void that surrounded them. "Is everyone all right?" Sarah called out, her voice barely audible above the wind's mournful wail. She helped Eleanor to her feet, noting with concern the blood trickling from a cut on the older woman's forehead. Beatrice emerged from beneath a pile of scattered luggage, thankfully unharmed but trembling violently with fear and cold. "We're going to die out here," Beatrice whispered, her eyes wide with terror as she surveyed the endless white surrounding them. "We most certainly are not," Eleanor stated with the firm resolve of a woman who had buried 2 husbands and raised 3 sons. "Someone will come for us." But as the minutes stretched into hours, the temperature continued to drop, and the storm showed no signs of abating. The 3 women huddled together beneath the partial shelter of the overturned coach, sharing what little warmth their bodies could generate. Sarah, at 26, had survived plenty of hardship since coming west after losing her parents to influenza. But she had never felt as helpless as she did now, responsible not just for herself, but for these 2 souls who had become her unlikely companions. Just as darkness began to fall, bringing with it the certainty of a frozen death, a shadow materialized from the white curtain of snow. At first, Sarah thought her mind was playing tricks, conjuring saviors from desperation. But then the shape solidified into a man astride a sturdy paint horse, his broad shoulders dusted with snow, a rifle secured to his saddle. "Hello, the coach," the deep voice carried authority even through the howling wind. "Anyone alive in there?" "Here," Sarah shouted, scrambling to her feet. "There are 3 of us." The rider dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. As he approached, Sarah saw a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of a summer sky that somehow cut through the blinding white of the storm. Dark stubble covered a strong jaw, and beneath his snow-dusted hat, strands of brown hair curled against his collar. "Name's Jasper Morgan," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "You ladies picked a hell of a day for a ride." "The weather was clear when we departed," Eleanor said defensively. "It came upon us with no warning." Jasper nodded, surveying the wreckage with experienced eyes. "November storms can be like that in these parts, deadly quick." He glanced at the darkening sky. "We need shelter and quick. My cabin's about 2 miles north. Can you all ride?" "What about the driver and the guard?" Sarah asked. A grim expression crossed Jasper's face. "Found the driver about a half-mile back, broken neck. No sign of the guard, but in this weather." He left the sentence unfinished, but they all understood. No one survived a night exposed in such conditions. "I can ride," Sarah said firmly, though in truth she had limited experience. Beatrice nodded timidly, while Eleanor squared her shoulders in silent affirmation. Horse can't take all four of us, Jasper said, eyes scanning their surroundings. With swift efficiency, he retrieved a rope from his saddle and tied it around his waist. You'll hold onto this, walk in my tracks exactly, stay close. If you can't see me through the snow, follow the rope. Understand? The journey was hellish. The wind cut like knives, and the snow had accumulated past their knees in places. Jasper broke trail, his powerful form forging a path that the three women followed in desperate single file. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on his broad back, occasionally glancing behind to ensure Beatrice and Alina remained connected to their lifeline. After what felt like an eternity, a dark shape emerged from the white void, a sturdy log cabin nestled against the side of a hill, partially protected from the worst of the wind. Jasper ushered them inside, where blissful stillness replaced the storm's constant howl. The cabin was simple but well-maintained. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold now but promising warmth. A rough-hewn table with 4 chairs sat in the center, while a curtained-off area presumably contained a bed. Shelves lined with provisions and tools spoke of careful preparation for winter's isolation. "Get those wet things off before you catch your death," Jasper instructed, already kneeling at the fireplace, skillfully building a fire with practiced movements. "Got some spare clothes in that trunk. Won't fit proper, but they're dry." While Alina helped Beatrice out of her sodden coat, Sarah found herself watching their rescuer. There was something compelling about the efficiency of his movements, the quiet competence in the way he coaxed flames from kindling. In minutes, a small fire blazed, gradually pushing back the cold that had seeped into their very bones. As the women changed behind the privacy of blankets strung up as makeshift curtains, Jasper melted snow in a large pot over the fire. "You're lucky," he commented as he added coffee grounds to a smaller pot. "Was tracking a mountain lion that's been taking my chickens when I spotted your coach. Another hour, I'd have been too far to hear anything." "Then it seems we owe your chickens our lives," Alina remarked dryly, emerging in an oversized flannel shirt and trousers rolled up several times at the ankles. A ghost of a smile touched Jasper's lips. "Suppose so." His eyes shifted to Sarah as she stepped out from behind the blanket, swimming in clothes clearly made for a man twice her size. Something flickered in his gaze before he quickly turned his attention back to the fire. "How long will the storm last?" Beatrice asked timidly, her slight form all but lost in the borrowed clothing. Jasper shrugged. "Hard to say. Could be a day, could be 3. These early winter storms are unpredictable." 3 days, Alina looked alarmed. "But we're expected in Agua Caliente. My son will worry terribly." "No one's traveling in this, madam, not even to search for missing stagecoaches." Jasper's tone was matter-of-fact rather than unkind. "Best make yourselves comfortable." That first night, they huddled near the fireplace, grateful for the warmth that gradually thawed their frozen extremities. Jasper insisted the women take the bed, while he made do with a bedroll near the fire. Despite her exhaustion, Sarah found sleep elusive, her mind replaying their narrow escape and wondering about the taciturn man who had saved them. Dawn brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the wind howled with renewed vigor, rattling the sturdy cabin shutters. Jasper was already up when Sarah stirred, tending the fire and preparing a simple breakfast of corn porridge. "Sleep well?" he asked, not looking up from his task. "As well as could be expected," Sarah replied, accepting a steaming mug of coffee. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan, for everything." "Jasper," he corrected. "No need for formalities when we're snowed in together." The day passed slowly. Alina occupied herself by mending a tear in Beatrice's salvaged dress. using supplies from Jasper's surprisingly well-stocked sewing kit. Beatrice wrote in a small journal she'd managed to keep dry, occasionally glancing nervously at their host. Sarah found herself drawn into conversation with Jasper as she helped prepare a stew from preserved venison and dried vegetables. "You live out here alone?" she asked, slicing carrots with a knife that had clearly seen years of use. "Suits me," he replied simply, then after a moment added, "People tend to complicate things. Yet you took in 3 strangers without hesitation." His hands paused momentarily over the pot he was tending. "Letting you freeze wasn't an option." "Some might have," Sarah said quietly. "I've encountered enough of mankind to know kindness isn't always the first instinct." Jasper studied her for a long moment, those sky-blue eyes seeming to see more than she intended to reveal. "You've had a hard road." It wasn't a question, but Sarah nodded anyway. "My parents died when I was 20. I came west with my uncle, who promised opportunity. Instead, he arranged a marriage to a man 3 times my age in exchange for a business partnership." Her hands worked steadily, despite the bitterness of the memories. "I left before the ceremony. Been making my own way since." "To Agua Caliente?" Jasper asked. "I have a position waiting as a seamstress at Harrigan's Mercantile," Sarah explained. "Mrs. Harrigan wrote that they're desperate for someone with skill with a needle." Jasper nodded thoughtfully. "Good folk, the Harrigans." As the day wore on, Sarah learned that Jasper had come to Arizona territory after the war between the states, seeking solitude after witnessing too much bloodshed. He'd worked as a ranch hand, a scout for the cavalry, and briefly as a deputy in Prescott, before deciding that wilderness suited him better than civilization. He'd built this cabin himself 3 years prior, supporting himself by hunting, trapping, and occasionally guiding parties of settlers or miners. By evening, when they gathered around the small table for stew and hardtack, the initial awkwardness had begun to dissolve. Even Beatrice had overcome some of her shyness, delighting them with her knowledge of literature as she recited poetry from memory. "You'll make a fine teacher," Elinor commented warmly. "If we ever reach Agua Caliente," Beatrice replied, glancing anxiously at the windows, where snow continued to accumulate. "We will," Jasper assured her. "Storm's voice is changing. Probably start tapering off by tomorrow afternoon." That night, as Elinor and Beatrice slept in the bed, Sarah sat by the fire, unable to rest. Jasper joined her silently, offering a mug of coffee laced with a hint of whiskey. "For the chill," he explained when she raised an eyebrow. They sat in companionable silence for a time, watching the flames dance. Sarah was acutely aware of his presence beside her, the heat radiating from his body somehow different from the fire's warmth. "Why a cabin so far from town?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper to avoid disturbing the others. Jasper's profile was striking in the firelight, shadows playing across the planes of his face. "After the war, crowds made me jumpy. Too many faces, too much noise." He took a sip from his mug. "Out here, things make sense. Animals, whether they are honest, they don't pretend to be something they're not. And people do, most," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Don't you find that to be true?" Sarah considered this, thinking of her uncle's false promises, the suitor who'd claimed love while eyeing her modest inheritance, the many masks she'd encountered on her journey west. "I suppose I do. But not you," Jasper said, turning to look directly at her. "You strike me as someone who says what she means." "I've found lies require too much energy to maintain," Sarah replied with a small smile. "Life's complicated enough without them." Something shifted in Jasper's expression, a softening around the eyes. "That it is." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities that made Sarah's heart beat faster. Then Jasper cleared his throat and stood, breaking the spell. "Should get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow might bring a chance to start digging out." True to Jasper's prediction, the storm began to ease the following day. Though snow still fell, the murderous wind had calmed to occasional gusts. By mid-afternoon, Jasper deemed it safe enough to venture to the barn, where he kept a few chickens and his horse. "Coming?" he asked Sarah, holding out a heavy coat. "Could use an extra pair of hands." Outside, the world had been transformed. Snow blanketed everything, smoothing the rugged landscape into gentle curves that glittered in the weak sunlight that occasionally pierced the clouds. They waded through drifts that reached past their knees, Jasper breaking trail as he had during their rescue. The barn was small but sturdy, and considerably warmer than the outside air. The chickens clucked indignantly at their entrance, while Jasper's paint horse nickered in recognition. "Poor creatures must have thought I'd abandoned them," Jasper said, immediately setting about refilling water troughs and distributing feed. Sarah helped as best she could, struck by the gentleness with which the rugged man handled his animals. His large hands, calloused from years of hard work, moved with surprising delicacy as he checked each chicken for signs of cold damage. "You're good with them," she observed. Jasper shrugged, a hint of color touching his cheeks that had nothing to do with the cold. "They depend on me." "That creates an obligation." "Like three-stranded women in a blizzard?" Sarah asked with a small smile. He glanced at her, something warm kindling in his eyes. "Something like that, though the chickens complain less." Sarah laughed, the sound startling in the quiet barn. "I should hope we've been more grateful than complaining." "You have," he assured her, then hesitated before adding, "Truth is, it's been nice, having people around again, conversation. Even though people complicate things," she reminded him of his earlier words. A genuine smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and hardship. Some complications might be worth it. They stood there amid the smell of hay and animals, a strange bubble of connection surrounding them that had nothing to do with their isolated circumstances, and everything to do with unexpected understanding. The moment was broken by a chicken squawking indignantly as it flapped past, apparently objecting to being confined during the storm. They both laughed, and the tension eased into something comfortable yet charged with possibility. By evening, the snow had stopped entirely, though the accumulation was substantial. After supper, Jasper spread out a rough map on the table, pointing out their location relative to Agua Caliente. "We're here," he indicated a spot near a line representing a creek. "Town's about 15 miles southwest. In normal conditions, it's an easy day's ride. With these drifts," he frowned thoughtfully, "could take twice as long, especially with one horse between 4 people." "Surely someone will come looking for the stagecoach soon," Alina suggested. Jasper nodded slowly. "Likely so once they realize it's overdue, but they'll start from town checking the regular route. Might be days before they search this far north where the storm pushed you." "So we're still stranded," Beatrice said, her voice small. "Only temporarily," Sarah assured her, surprising herself with her lack of urgency. A week ago, reaching Agua Caliente had seemed the most important goal in her life. Now, she found herself oddly reluctant to leave the cabin and its owner. "I'll head out tomorrow," Jasper decided. "Scout the route, maybe reach town and bring back help. You ladies will be safe here with supplies." "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, drawing surprised looks from everyone. "It's foolish to travel alone in these conditions. If something happened to you, we'd have no way of knowing or helping." "I've survived worse," Jasper countered. Perhaps, but there's no need for heroics when patience will serve just as well, Alina interjected diplomatically. The storm has passed. In a day or two, the sun will melt enough snow to make travel easier or help will find us. After some discussion, they agreed to wait one more day before making any decisions. That night, as they prepared for sleep, Sarah found herself lingering by the fire again, drawn to these quiet moments with Jasper when the others slept. "You don't need to keep me company," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't mind. "Perhaps I enjoy the conversation," Sarah replied, settling beside him with a mug of tea. Jasper studied her for a long moment. "You're different from most women I've known. Is that good or bad?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Good," he said without hesitation. "You face things head-on. No games, no pretenses." "Life's too short for those," Sarah said softly, thinking of her parents' sudden deaths, how quickly security could turn to uncertainty. "What will you do in Agua Caliente besides sewing?" The question surprised her. Few had ever asked about her hopes beyond survival. "Build something of my own eventually, maybe a dress shop." She traced the rim of her mug thoughtfully. "I've spent too long depending on others' goodwill. I want something that's mine that can't be taken away." "Sounds lonely," Jasper observed quietly. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Says the man who lives miles from his nearest neighbor." A slow smile spread across his face. "Touché. What about you? Will you stay out here forever, just you and your chickens?" Jasper looked into the flames, his expression contemplative. "Never thought much beyond the next season. Get through winter, plant in spring, preserve for fall. Repeat. And that's enough." He was silent for so long Sarah thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "It was. Until recently." The weight of unspoken meaning hung between them, as tangible as the heat from the fire. Sarah found herself leaning slightly closer, drawn by something she couldn't name but recognized on some primal level. Jasper's eyes dropped to her lips for just an instant before he abruptly stood. "Should check the perimeter before turning in," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Storms like this sometimes push predators closer to human dwellings when hunting gets difficult." Before Sarah could respond, he had donned his coat and stepped outside, leaving her alone with the crackling fire and her confused thoughts. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the windows and reflecting blindingly off the snow. After breakfast, Jasper announced he would attempt to reach the top of the nearby hill to get a better view of the surroundings. "I'll come with you," Sarah said, already reaching for her borrowed coat. Jasper looked as though he might object, then nodded. "Wear these," he said, handing her a pair of crude snowshoes fashioned from bent wood and rawhide. "They'll keep you from sinking too deep." The trek up the hill was challenging despite the snowshoes. Sarah's muscles burned with the unfamiliar exertion, but she refused to complain or fall behind. Jasper occasionally glanced back, offering an encouraging nod when he saw her determination. At the crest, they were rewarded with a spectacular view. The snow-covered landscape stretched in all directions, pristine and unmarked save for the occasional dark green of pine trees bowing under white burden. In the far distance, barely visible, was a thin line of smoke that Jasper identified as likely coming from Agua Caliente. "Beautiful," Sarah breathed, momentarily forgetting the cold as she took in the vista. "Yes," Jasper agreed, though when she turned, she found him looking not at the landscape but at her. A blush warmed her cheeks despite the chill air. "Do you think anyone is searching for us yet?" Jasper returned his attention to the distant horizon, shading his eyes against the glare. "If the stage was due in yesterday, they'll be organizing a search by now." He pointed to the southwest. "That's the regular route there, where it follows the creek valley. They'll start looking there first." As they stood taking in the view, A movement in the distance caught Sarah's eye. "Look there," she said, pointing to what appeared to be dark shapes moving slowly through the snow. Jasper squinted. "Riders, 3, maybe 4. He observed them for another moment. "Coming this way, but they're still miles off. Must be the search party. Should we go back and tell the others?" Sarah asked, excitement building at the prospect of rescue. "Not yet," Jasper said, his expression unreadable. "They'll still be hours reaching us if that's where they're headed, and they might change course if they find sign of the stagecoach elsewhere." They remained on the hilltop a while longer, watching the distant riders' slow progress. The sun had risen higher, taking the edge off the morning chill, and Sarah found herself reluctant to leave this peaceful vantage point. "Will you be glad to see us go?" she asked suddenly, the question slipping out before she could reconsider. Jasper was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Should be," he finally said. "Been alone so long, it's what I'm used to." "But," Sarah prompted gently when he didn't continue. He turned to her then, his expression more open than she'd yet seen it. "But I find myself wondering what it might be like to have a reason not to be alone." The words hung in the crisp air between them, laden with meaning. Sarah felt something tug in her chest, a recognition of possibility that both thrilled and terrified her. "I thought you said people complicate things," she reminded him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some things," Jasper acknowledged, taking a step closer, "are worth complicating." The distance between them had narrowed to mere inches. Sarah could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, feel the warmth radiating from him even through their layers of clothing. Her heart hammered against her ribs as Jasper slowly, deliberately lifted a gloved hand to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Sarah," he began, her name a gentle rumble that seemed to vibrate through her very being. A gunshot cracked the silence, startling them apart. The sound echoed across the valley, followed by another. Not close, but not distant either. "The search party?" Sarah asked, though something in Jasper's suddenly alert posture told her otherwise. "No," he said grimly, already moving toward the descent. "Those weren't signal shots. Come on, we need to get back to the cabin." They hurried down the hill, the snowshoes making the descent treacherous. Twice, Sarah nearly lost her balance, saved only by Jasper's quick hand catching her elbow. By the time they reached the cabin, Alina and Beatrice were standing anxiously by the door. "We heard shooting," Alina said, her normally composed face tight with concern. "Probably nothing," Jasper said reassuringly, though his actions belied his words as he immediately went to retrieve his rifle from beside the door. "But best to be cautious. Please stay inside." "What's happening?" Beatrice asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Could be hunters," Jasper explained, checking his ammunition. "Could be the search party firing signals. Either way, I'm going to make sure." "I thought you said the search party was miles away," Sarah said quietly so the others couldn't hear. Jasper gave her a sharp look. "I did." He hesitated, then added in a low voice, "Those shots came from the wrong direction. Stay here with the others. Bar the door behind me." Before Sarah could protest, he had stepped outside, rifle in hand. She quickly secured the door as instructed, then moved to the window, straining to see where he had gone. His tracks led toward the trees at the edge of the clearing, where he had disappeared from view. Long minutes passed with no sign of Jasper or any explanation for the gunshots. The women waited in tense silence, jumping at every creak of the cabin's timbers as the sun warmed the roof. "Perhaps it was just someone hunting," Alina suggested, though she didn't sound convinced. Another shot rang out, this one much closer than before. Beatrice gasped, and Sarah moved instinctively away from the window. "We need to be ready," she said with more confidence than she felt. Jasper must have other weapons here. A quick search revealed a shotgun mounted on pegs above the door and a revolver wrapped in oilcloth in a drawer. Sarah took the revolver, checking that it was loaded as she'd once seen her father do. She had never fired a gun but understood the basic principle. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you know how to use a shotgun?" she asked. Eleanor's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she nodded firmly. "My late husband insisted I learn. It's been some years, but I remember the essentials." Sarah handed her the weapon. "Beatrice, watch the back window. If you see anyone who isn't Jasper approaching, tell us immediately." They had barely taken their positions when hoofbeats approached the cabin, followed by a loud voice. "Hello, the cabin. Anyone home?" The three women exchanged uncertain glances. The voice was unfamiliar, not Jasper's deep tones. "What do we do?" Beatrice whispered. Sarah moved cautiously to the window, peering out from the side to minimize her visibility. Two riders had entered the clearing, rough-looking men with the weather-beaten appearance of those who lived hard lives. One had a bandana pulled up over his nose despite the cold, while the other wore no disguise, his face visible beneath his battered hat's sharp features dominated by a jagged scar that ran from temple to jaw. "I know you're in there," the scarred man called. "Saw the smoke from your chimney. We're just looking for some hospitality. Got separated from our party in the storm." Something about their stance, the way their hands hovered near their holstered weapons, set alarm bells ringing in Sarah's mind. These were not lost travelers. "What do you think?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible. "I think they're lying," Sarah replied grimly. "And I think we need to stall until Jasper returns." Making a swift decision, she called out, "My husband's gone hunting. He should be back shortly." The men exchanged glances, and the scarred one smiled unpleasantly. "Well now, madam, we'd sure appreciate warming up while we wait for him. Been a cold ride." "I'm afraid I can't let strangers in while he's away," Sarah responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "His instructions were very clear." "That's not very neighborly," the man with the bandana said, his hand now resting openly on his pistol. "Especially since we know the man who lives here is called Morgan, and he ain't married." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather ran down Sarah's spine. These men knew Jasper by name, which meant their presence was no coincidence. "Last chance to open up peacefully," the scarred man called, his pretense of friendliness evaporating. "We just want to talk to Morgan when he gets back. Got some unfinished business." Sarah's mind raced. Where was Jasper? Had these men encountered him in the woods? Was he hurt or worse? She needed to buy time. "He's gone to meet the search party," she improvised. "There's a stagecoach full of passengers missing, and he's guiding the rescue. 10 armed men at least, and they'll be here any minute." The scarred man laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "Nice try, lady. We just came from that direction. Ain't no search party within miles." He dismounted, his intentions clear. "Looks like we'll have to invite ourselves in." Before he could take another step, a voice rang out from the tree line. "That's far enough, Radley." Jasper emerged from the trees, rifle aimed steadily at the scarred man. His face was a mask of controlled fury, his eyes cold as the snow beneath his boots. "Well, well," the man called Radley drawled, though he froze in place. "If it ain't the Honorable Deputy Morgan, been a long time." "Not long enough," Jasper replied evenly. "What are you doing on my property?" "Just passing through," Radley said with mock innocence. "Heard you'd gone hermit up in these parts. Thought I'd pay a social call, seeing as how we're old acquaintances." "We were never acquainted," Jasper said coldly. "I arrested you. There's a difference." Radley's smile vanished. "And I served my time. 3 years in Yuma for a robbery you couldn't even prove I committed." The judge and jury seemed convinced. Jasper responded. "Now, I suggest you and your friend get back on your horses and ride away. There's nothing for you here." A tense silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the nervous shuffle of the horses. Sarah held her breath, the revolver heavy in her hand as she watched the standoff through the window. "You always were too self-righteous," Radley finally said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "Thinking you're better than everyone else. But you're out here all alone for a reason, ain't you, Morgan? Running from something just like the rest of us." "I'm not asking again," Jasper said, taking a step forward. "Leave." For a moment it seemed Radley might comply. He turned toward his horse, hand reaching for the reins. Then, with snake-like speed, he drew his pistol instead. The report of Jasper's rifle cracked across the clearing an instant before Radley could fire. The outlaw staggered, clutching his shoulder as his unfired weapon dropped to the snow. His companion immediately raised his hands in surrender. "You should have killed me," Radley ground out through clenched teeth, blood seeping between his fingers. "Not my way," Jasper replied, keeping his rifle trained on both men. "But I won't miss next time if you give me reason." Under Jasper's watchful eye, the uninjured outlaw helped Radley back onto his horse. "The law in Prescott still knows me," Jasper warned them. "I find out you're causing trouble anywhere in the territory, I'll make sure they know where to find you." With venomous glares but no further violence, the two men rode out of the clearing, Radley swaying slightly in his saddle from pain and blood loss. Only when they had disappeared from sight did Jasper lower his rifle and approach the cabin. Sarah flung open the door before he reached it, relief washing over her at the sight of him unharmed. "Are you all right?" they asked in unison, then shared a brief, tense smile at the coincidence. "We're fine," Sarah assured him as Alina and Beatrice appeared behind her. Though thoroughly frightened, who were those men? Jasper's expression darkened as he entered the cabin, securing the door behind him. "Wade Radley was part of a gang that robbed the Prescott Bank when I was deputy there. I tracked and arrested him, testified at his trial. He swore he'd find me when he got out." He set his rifle down with a sigh. "Guess he made good on that promise." "Will they come back?" Beatrice asked fearfully. Jasper shook his head. "Not likely. Radley needs medical attention, and he knows I won't hesitate to shoot straighter next time. Besides, we saw riders from the hill. If that's the search party, they'll be here before nightfall." The tension in the cabin gradually eased as the afternoon wore on with no sign of the outlaws returning. True to Jasper's prediction, just as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the sound of multiple horses and men's voices reached them. This time, the call from outside was official and welcome. "Hello, the cabin. Arizona Rangers with the stage company search party." Sarah watched Jasper's face as he went to greet the newcomers, noting the complex emotions that crossed his features. Relief for their safety, certainly, but something else, a shadow of regret that their time of isolation was ending. She felt it too, this strange reluctance to return to the world that awaited them. In just 3 days, this cabin had become more than a shelter from the storm. It had become a place where unexpected connections had formed, where Sarah had glimpsed possibilities she had never before considered. The search party consisted of 4 rangers and 2 men from the stage company. They were delighted to find the missing women alive and well, having already discovered the wrecked stagecoach and the bodies of the driver and guard, the latter found half a mile from the crash site, victim to the cold. "You ladies are mighty lucky Mr. Morgan found you," the lead ranger commented as they shared a hastily prepared meal. "Not many would have survived a night in that storm." "We're well aware of our debt to him," Alina replied with genuine gratitude. Plans were quickly made. The rangers had brought 2 extra horses, enough for the women to ride double with them back to Agua Caliente. They would depart at first light, when traveling would be easiest. As evening settled over the cabin, now crowded with their rescuers, Sarah found herself seeking a moment of privacy. She stepped onto the small porch, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the night chill. The stars shone with brilliant clarity in the cold air, so numerous they seemed to fill every inch of the black sky. She heard the door open behind her but didn't turn, somehow knowing it would be Jasper. He joined her silently, respecting her contemplation for several minutes before speaking. "Tomorrow you'll be in Agua Caliente," he said quietly. "Your new life can begin." Sarah nodded, still looking at the stars. "Yes, everything I've been working toward. You'll do well there," Jasper said with quiet certainty. "You have strength in you, determination." "As do you," she replied, finally turning to face him. In the dim light spilling from the cabin windows, his features were softened, the habitual guardedness momentarily absent. "Though you use yours to hide away rather than forge ahead." He didn't deny it. "We all cope with life in our own ways." "Is it really coping, though?" Sarah asked gently. "Or is it just existing?" Jasper's brow furrowed slightly. "Sometimes existing is all a person can manage. And sometimes," Sarah said, taking a small step closer, "it's not enough." They stood in silence, the unspoken hanging between them, heavy with potential and uncertainty. Sarah thought of the moment on the hilltop, interrupted by gunshots, and wondered what might have happened if they'd had more time. "I should thank you," she finally said, "for saving us, for sharing your home, your food." "No thanks needed," Jasper replied gruffly. "Anyone would have done the same." "We both know that's not true," Sarah countered. "Most would have seen 3 stranded women as burdens, not responsibilities. You could have pointed us toward town and left us to fend for ourselves once the worst of the storm passed." Jasper shifted uncomfortably under her steady gaze. "Couldn't do that. Because of obligation," Sarah pressed, remembering his words in the barn. "Or was there another reason?" His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the same conflict. She felt the pull of connection warring with the safety of distance. "Sarah," he began, his voice rough with emotion he seemed unused to expressing. "I've been alone a long time. Thought I preferred it that way. Then you arrived and I—" He trailed off, struggling for words. "And you?" she prompted softly. "I found myself wondering what it might be like not to be alone," he admitted, echoing his words from the hilltop. "What it might be like to have someone who sees the world as clearly as you do. Someone who doesn't flinch from hard truths but faces them head-on." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. "I've spent years making my own way," she said carefully, "learning to depend on no one but myself." "I know," Jasper acknowledged, "and I wouldn't ask you to change that." "Independence is nothing to surrender lightly." "No," she agreed, "but perhaps there's a difference between surrendering independence and choosing to share a path." Hope flickered in Jasper's eyes. "What are you saying?" Sarah took a deep breath, scarcely believing her own boldness. "I'm saying that Agua Caliente has many seamstresses, I imagine. But how many have a dress shop of their own?" "None that I know of," Jasper replied, a hint of confusion in his tone. "And how far is it from here to town? When there isn't a blizzard, I mean." Understanding dawned on his face. "About 3 hours' ride, less if the horse is fresh." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "Not so far that a person couldn't make the journey regularly, for supplies or to deliver finished garments." "No," Jasper agreed, a cautious smile beginning to form. "Not so far at all." "I still want my shop," Sarah said firmly. "I still need to stand on my own." "I wouldn't expect otherwise," Jasper assured her. "But perhaps—" Sarah hesitated, then pressed on with characteristic directness. "Perhaps there could be more than one place I belong." Jasper reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and took her hand. His palm was warm despite the cold air, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew it contained. "I'd like that," he said simply. "Very much." The door opened behind them, spilling light and voices onto the porch. Elena appeared, pausing when she saw them standing close together, hands joined. "Oh, I beg your pardon," she said, a knowing smile touching her lips. "I just wanted to make sure you hadn't frozen out here, Sarah." "Not at all," Sarah replied, making no move to step away from Jasper or release his hand. "We were just discussing future possibilities." Elena's smile widened. "I see. Well, don't stay out too long. Early start tomorrow." She retreated inside, closing the door deliberately behind her. Alone again, Sarah and Jasper shared a smile at the older woman's transparent approval. "She likes you," Sarah commented. "She likes the idea of you not traveling to Agua Caliente alone," Jasper corrected wryly. "Perhaps she sees something worth encouraging," Sarah suggested, suddenly shy despite her earlier boldness. Jasper's free hand came up to gently touch her cheek. "Perhaps she does." Then, with the same deliberate care he showed in all things, he lowered his head and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, a beginning rather than a culmination. Sarah responded in kind, her hand coming to rest lightly on his chest, feeling the strong heartbeat beneath her palm. When they parted, Jasper rested his forehead against hers for a moment, his breath creating small clouds in the cold air between them. "I don't know exactly what this is," he admitted quietly, "or what it could be. It's been a long time since I've felt anything like it." "For me as well," Sarah assured him. "We don't need to define it tonight. We have time." They returned inside to find the Rangers spreading their bedrolls around the cabin's main room, while Elena and Beatrice prepared for a final night in Jasper's bed. As Sarah joined them, Elena gave her a questioning look, which Sarah answered with a small nod. The older woman squeezed her hand in silent approval. That night, as the cabin filled with the sounds of sleeping men, Sarah lay awake, her mind whirling with possibilities she had never considered before coming to this place. She had been so focused on reaching Agua Caliente, on establishing her independence, that she had never stopped to consider what else life might offer. Now, watching the dying firelight play across the ceiling, she found herself imagining a future that balanced her need for self-reliance with the unexpected gift of connection. It wouldn't be easy, nothing worthwhile ever was, but for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to hope for more than mere survival. The journey to Agua Caliente the next day was uneventful, the bright sun and clear skies a stark contrast to the deadly conditions that had brought them to Jasper's cabin. The women rode double with 3 of the Rangers, while Jasper accompanied them on his own horse, having insisted on seeing them safely to town. Agua Caliente proved to be larger than Sarah had expected, a bustling settlement that had grown rapidly thanks to nearby silver mines. The main street boasted several substantial buildings, including a 2-story hotel, a bank, and the promised Harrigan's Mercantile. Word of their rescue had preceded them, and a small crowd gathered as they rode in. A well-dressed man in his 40s pushed through, his face lighting with relief when he spotted Elena. "Mother," he called, rushing forward to help her dismount. "Thank God you're safe. When the stage didn't arrive, I feared the worst." Elena embraced her son warmly. "We would have perished if not for Mr. Morgan," she told him, gesturing to Jasper. "He saved us from the storm and sheltered us until help arrived." Similar reunions occurred as Beatrice was met by the town's mayor, who had hired her as teacher for the growing population of children. Sarah, having no one expecting her, felt momentarily adrift until Mrs. Harrigan, a plump, cheerful woman in her 50s, stepped forward. "You must be Miss Miller," she said warmly. "We've been so worried. When the stage company reported it missing, we feared the worst." "I'm perfectly well, thanks to Mr. Morgan," Sarah replied, glancing at Jasper, who sat somewhat uncomfortably on his horse, clearly unaccustomed to being the center of attention. "Then we owe him our thanks as well," Mrs. Harrigan declared. "We've been desperate for a skilled seamstress since Mrs. Thornton passed last spring. Half the ladies in town have postponed ordering new dresses until your arrival." As the initial excitement subsided, practical matters were attended to. The Rangers departed to file their report, while the stage company representative arranged for the women's salvaged luggage to be delivered to their respective accommodations. Alina would stay with her son, Beatrice at the schoolmistress's cottage, and Sarah in rooms above the mercantile that came with her position. Through it all, Sarah was acutely aware of Jasper's presence, solid and reassuring even as he maintained a respectful distance. When the time came for him to leave, he approached her somewhat awkwardly, hat in hand. "You're settled then?" he asked, his voice low enough that others couldn't overhear. "For now," Sarah confirmed. "Mrs. Harrigan seems kind. I think the position will suit me well." Jasper nodded, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Good, that's good. Will you?" Sarah hesitated, conscious of the curious glances from townsfolk still lingering nearby. "Will you be returning home directly? Need to resupply first," he replied. "Probably stay the night, head back tomorrow." Hope fluttered in Sarah's chest. "Perhaps we could speak again before you leave. There are matters we didn't fully resolve." The corner of Jasper's mouth lifted in a small smile. "I'd like that. I'll call on you this evening if that's acceptable." "Very acceptable," Sarah assured him, returning his smile. True to his word, Jasper appeared at the mercantile just as it was closing that evening. Mrs. Harrigan, who had spent the day acquainting Sarah with the shop and her duties, gave them a knowing look but discreetly retired to her own quarters at the back of the building. "Would you care to walk?" Sarah suggested, unwilling to conduct their conversation in the confines of the store or her small rooms above. They strolled along Agua Caliente's Main Street as the day's business concluded around them. Despite the recent snow, the town was active, miners and merchants alike taking advantage of the clear weather. Several people nodded respectfully to Jasper, his role in the women's rescue having quickly become common knowledge. "You're something of a local hero," Sarah observed with amusement. Jasper grimaced slightly. "Not a title I ever sought or deserve." "I disagree," Sarah said firmly. "Without you, we would have died in that storm. Heroes are defined by their actions, not their intentions." They had reached the edge of town, where the ordered buildings gave way to open country. By mutual, unspoken agreement, they continued walking, seeking privacy for the conversation they both knew was coming. "I've been thinking," Sarah began once they were beyond earshot of the nearest buildings, "about what we discussed last night." "As have I," Jasper admitted. "And?" she prompted when he didn't elaborate. He stopped, turning to face her directly. In the fading light, his features were etched with sincerity and a vulnerability she suspected few had ever been allowed to see. "I meant what I said," he told her quietly, "about wanting more than solitude. About seeing something in you that—" He paused, searching for words. "Something that makes me believe connection might be worth the risk." Sarah's heart swelled at his honesty. "I feel the same," she said, "which is why I have a proposal." Jasper's eyebrows rose slightly, but he waited for her to continue. "I still need to establish myself here," Sarah explained, "to prove I can stand on my own both to myself and to others. I've waited too long for this opportunity to abandon it entirely." "I wouldn't ask you to," Jasper assured her quickly. "I know," Sarah smiled, "which is one of the reasons I find myself drawn to you. You understand the value of independence." She took a deep breath. "So I propose this. I'll stay in Agua Caliente, work at the mercantile, save toward opening my own shop, and you'll return to your cabin, continuing the life you've built there." Jasper's expression remained carefully neutral, though she thought she detected a flicker of disappointment. "I see. But," Sarah continued, her gaze steady on his, "we won't return to our separate lives entirely. Instead, we'll create a bridge between them. You'll come to town when supplies or business bring you, and perhaps sometimes just to see me. I'll visit your cabin when my duties allow. We'll write letters in between." "Letters," Jasper repeated thoughtfully. "The stage passes weekly," Sarah confirmed. "Not so long to wait for words, even when we can't share them in person." "And in time?" Jasper asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "What do you envision?" Sarah stepped closer, emboldened by the emotion she saw in his eyes. "In time, I hope we'll find that the distance between your world and mine doesn't need to be a barrier. That we can build something that honors both our needs for independence and our desire for connection." "Something like a partnership," Jasper suggested, cautious hope warming his voice. "Exactly like a partnership," Sarah agreed. "Equal, honest, respecting each other's strengths." Jasper considered this for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, with deliberate movement, he reached for her hands, engulfing them in his larger ones. "I'd like to court you properly, Sarah Miller," he said, the formal words carrying the weight of genuine feeling. "Not rushed by circumstance or crisis, but with the time and attention you deserve." Joy bubbled up inside her, as bright and unexpected as sunshine after storm. "I'd like that very much, Jasper Morgan." This time when they kissed, it held the promise of a future they would craft together, step by careful step. Not a surrender of independence, but a choosing of connection. Not an ending of solitude, but a beginning of shared strength. Winter gave way to spring, the snows melting to reveal a landscape reborn in vibrant green. Sarah flourished in her position at Harrigan's, her skill with needle and fabric quickly earning her a reputation that extended beyond Agua Caliente to neighboring settlements. Mrs. Harrigan, delighted with her new employee, had already hinted that she might be interested in taking on a partner when her arthritis made the work too difficult. True to his word, Jasper came to town regularly, sometimes staying for a day, sometimes for a week. Between visits, letters traveled back and forth, Sarah's neat handwriting detailing town events and her progress toward her dream. Jasper's more careful script sharing observations of nature's cycles and gradual renovations to his cabin that somehow always seemed to make room for a woman's comfort. By summer, their courtship had become common knowledge, accepted with approval by the community that had come to respect both the independent seamstress and the reclusive frontiersman who had saved their stagecoach passengers. Eleanor, still residing with her son, became a staunch ally, often inviting them to dinner and smoothing Sarah's path in local society. One golden afternoon in September, exactly 10 months after the blizzard that had brought them together, Jasper arrived in town earlier than expected. Sarah was helping a customer when the bell above the shop door jangled, and she looked up to find him standing there, hat in hand, an uncharacteristic nervousness about him. "Jasper," she exclaimed in delight, "I didn't expect you until tomorrow." "Couldn't wait," he replied simply, his eyes drinking her in as though they had been separated for months rather than weeks. Mrs. Harrigan, observing their reunion with maternal satisfaction, shooed Sarah away from her work. "Go on, dear. I can finish up here." You two clearly have matters to discuss." Minutes later, they were walking along their familiar path to the edge of town, Sarah's hand tucked comfortably in the crook of Jasper's arm. The afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, from the distant mountains to the ripening fields surrounding the settlement. "You're unusually quiet," Sarah observed after they had walked some distance in companionable silence. "Is everything all right at the cabin?" "Everything's fine," Jasper assured her. "Better than fine, in fact." He led her to a small rise overlooking a meadow where wildflowers still bloomed despite the advancing season. It was here they often came to talk, to share dreams and plans, to strengthen the bond that had begun in crisis and deepened through deliberate choice. "I have news," Jasper said as they settled on a sun-warmed boulder. "And a question." Sarah's heart quickened, though she kept her voice level. "I'm listening." "I've purchased land," he announced. 40 acres, about halfway between my current place and town. There's a good creek, decent grazing for horses, and enough timber to build a proper house." "Jasper," Sarah exclaimed, genuinely surprised. "That's wonderful. But what about your cabin? You love that place." "I do," he acknowledged. "And I'll keep it as a hunting lodge perhaps, or a retreat when winter makes travel difficult. But I've been thinking about what you said all those months ago, about building a bridge between our worlds." He took both her hands in his gaze intense and unwavering. "What if we built something new instead? Not my world or yours, but ours. A place close enough to town for you to continue your work, yet far enough away to have the space and quiet I need." Hope and happiness surged through Sarah, but she contained them, wanting to be certain. "Are you proposing a business arrangement, Jasper Morgan?" she asked, a teasing lilt to her voice despite the seriousness of the moment. A slow smile spread across his face. "No, Sarah Miller. I'm proposing marriage." He squeezed her hands gently. "I love you. I think I started loving you that first night by the fire when you spoke so honestly about wanting to build something of your own. I admired your strength then, and I treasure it now." Tears of joy sprang to Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back, not wanting to miss a moment of this. "And I love you," she replied softly, "for seeing me as I am, for respecting my need for independence even as you offered shelter from the storm. Is that a yes?" Jasper asked, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. "Yes," Sarah confirmed without hesitation. 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in Agua Calient's small church, with Alina serving as Sarah's matron of honor, and, to everyone's surprise, the town's sheriff standing up for Jasper, a former colleague from his deputy days in Prescott. Beatrice, now settled into her role as schoolteacher, led her pupils in singing hymns for the occasion. The celebration afterward spilled from the church into the street, the entire town turning out to wish them well. When the time came for their departure, Sarah changed from her wedding dress, a creation she had secretly worked on for months, into a practical riding outfit, also of her own making. "Ready?" Jasper asked as he helped her mount her horse, a chestnut mare he had given her as an engagement present. Sarah looked around at the town that had welcomed her, the friends who had become family, and the man who had gone from stranger to rescuer to beloved. "Ready," she confirmed with a radiant smile. They rode out together as the setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and golds, the same colors that had warmed them during those first days of connection. Not toward Jasper's solitary cabin, but toward the new land they would shape together, a perfect balance of town and wilderness, independence and partnership, past and future. As darkness fell, they made camp beneath a canopy of stars, a small fire between them and the night's chill. Sarah watched as Jasper tended the flames with the same care he had shown during the blizzard, his movements sure and confident. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her gaze on him. Sarah smiled, remembering the storm that had brought them to this moment. "I was thinking that some fires provide more than just warmth," she replied softly. "They provide light to see by, courage to face the unknown, and hope when all seems lost." Jasper moved to sit beside her, his arm encircling her waist as they watched the flames dance. "Then I'll keep our fire burning," he promised, "through whatever storms may come." And in that moment, with the firelight illuminating their faces and the vast Arizona sky stretching above them, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that they had found in each other not just shelter from life's storms, but the strength to weather them together. The cabin they built on their new land became known throughout the territory for its unique blend of rugged practicality and unexpected comforts. Jasper constructed it with the same meticulous care he brought to all his endeavors, while Sarah transformed the interior into a home that honored both their needs: a large workshop where she could create her increasingly sought-after designs, a study where Jasper could retreat when the need for solitude pressed upon him, and shared spaces where they came together in the partnership they had carefully cultivated. True to her dream, Sarah opened her dress shop in Agua Caliente the following year, traveling to town 3 days a week while spending the remainder at home. Her reputation spread beyond the immediate area, bringing customers from as far as Prescott and Phoenix, some staying at the town's hotel for days while she created garments they couldn't find elsewhere in the territory. Jasper, meanwhile, found a new purpose in breeding and training horses, combining his deep understanding of the land with his natural affinity for animals. His stock became known for their intelligence and endurance, particularly valued by the cavalry and stagecoach companies operating in the harsh Arizona terrain. Their life together was not without challenges. The territory remained wild in many ways, with natural disasters, outlaw gangs, and the ongoing tensions between settlers and native tribes creating periods of uncertainty and danger. But together they faced each obstacle, their different strengths complementing each other in ways that made them more resilient as a pair than either could have been alone. In the spring of 1878, their joy was multiplied with the birth of their son, James, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined expression. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, whose arrival coincided with the completion of the railroad spur to Agua Caliente, bringing increased prosperity to the town and expanded opportunities for both their businesses. Through it all, they never forgot the storm that had brought them together, or the lessons it had taught them about survival, interdependence, and the warmth that could be found even in the coldest circumstances. Each year, on the anniversary of the blizzard, they would light a special fire in their hearth and tell their children the story of how a stagecoach accident and an unexpected rescuer had changed the course of their lives. And sometimes, when winter storms howled around their sturdy home, Sarah would catch Jasper's eye across the room and remember those first days in his cabin, when his firelight had been the only sun they needed to find their way through the darkness into a future brighter than either could have imagined alone.